Cool. And we are live.
Fantastic. Well, everybody, welcome to another community office hours. Today, we're going to be talking Waypoint 0.4. I've got guests Brian and Izaak here with me. And before I go ahead and introduce them, would like to share our community guidelines really quickly. What these simplify down to are please be excellent to one another. I'm going to go ahead and paste that link in the chat if you care to check out our guidelines in a little bit more detail. My name is Taylor Dolezal, and mostly I'm focused on all things infrastructure, developer experience, application delivery, and things like that here at HashiCorp. And so you can imagine Waypoint is something that I find quite interesting, especially using Terraform to stand some things up and using Waypoint to instantiate different applications and workloads across many different clouds, or maybe Raspberry Pi clusters too. It's always fun here. So with that, welcome. Happy to have you all here, and would love to turn it over to Brian and kind of get what's your elevator pitch, Brian? Who are you?
Cool. Yes, who are we? It's a deep question. Yeah, my name's Brian. I've been working on the Waypoint team since last November. Before that, I was working on Vagrant for about 3.5 years. And so I like the developer space that this tool intersects with. And so, yeah, I guess one thing that I'm excited about with Waypoint is that it's a new tool. And so there's a lot of, really cool things that we're able to do because of that. And so, yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Happy to have you. What about you, Izaak? Can you give us an intro about yourself and kind of a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, my name is Izaak Lauer. I'm very new to the Waypoint team. Been here for about a month so far, new to HashiCorp too. But I've been in the infrastructure space for a while. Prior to this, I worked on infrastructure at Target, building core infrastructure tooling very similar to Waypoint, sort of solving the same kind of problem space. And then immediately prior to this, I worked on the Biden for President campaign, helping build core infrastructure there. And I'm really excited about Waypoint because it's a tool that would have solved a lot of problems that I've had in previous jobs. On a really small team, it helps so much with onboarding, with helping developers have like a consistent experience across multiple different kinds of infrastructure, thinking about like trying to train people on how to use Kubernetes and Lambda functions and AWS and all of it. It's so much easier when you can just say, hey, you get your logs by doing Waypoint logs. And I'm excited about it from the standpoint of a platform developer too, because it's something that not every big company has to build themselves anymore. With Waypoint, you can build something that gives developers that sort of abstract experience and decouples them directly from the infrastructure. So that's why I'm excited about Waypoint, and that's why I'm here.
Nice.
I think that Waypoint's a really interesting tool, and having the ability to have platforms like Kubernetes or Nomad and the ability to schedule things and work with orchestration frameworks like that, I think is a really powerful concept. And like you said, using Waypoint to make that an easier thing to tackle for teams. With that, for people that are just kind of new in joining the stream or getting up to speed with what Waypoint is exactly, do you have a good description for what Waypoint does, and kind of like some of the intersects that it makes for the community?
I guess I would say the big thing is it tries to simplify, the development to production workflow. Like some of our other tools, we have this like single Waypoint file. And we're talking about when you run this file, we have like a Waypoint up command, and we're defining these different life cycles, like the build, deploy, release. And so we're giving you sort of like a opinionated workflow on top of your already existing infrastructure. And I think that's nice because, like you said, these platforms are really complicated, or can be, especially if you're new. And so instead of getting, lost or confused, like hopefully Waypoint is that like first step into, repeatable deployments and repeatable releases.
I think the name Waypoint sums it up really well too, and being a good waypoint for like, what are we doing? How do we go about doing these things? Yeah. Well thought out +1. Humble brag. Waypoint 04 just came out recently. I was really excited to see some features in there again, like things like mutable deploys, things like status checks. Can both of you give us an insight into what are some of those new features and some of the things that you were really excited to see land in 0.4?
Sure, I'll take status checks because that was the thing that was sort of like my brainy idea. When you deploy something, you want to ensure that it worked, right? You don't want the tool to exit and be like, yeah, I guess we deployed it, whatever, we'll move on. You want to make sure that it's running, it's healthy, it's able to be used. And so the idea with these status checks is not only is Waypoint going to deploy something for you, but it's also going to see like, okay, well, if you have like liveness checks, let's bring that into Waypoint so that you can actually see it like on a dashboard or in the CLI. And so, and let's also like keep reporting on the application. So, like 3 hours from now, is it still up or did it die, a few hours ago and like no one caught it. And so that's sort of the main feature of that status check. I don't know. Izaak, would you like to talk about mutable deploys?
Yeah. I'm super excited about status checks too, by the way. I love how it it's coupling Waypoint a little bit more tightly with the platforms that it runs on.
Yeah.
It seems like it really opens the door for us to expose more information about those platforms potentially. Mutable deployments are really interesting too. There are a few aspects to those. Mutable deployments means like Waypoint. Before mutable deployments, Waypoint had the idea that infrastructure was immutable. Every deployment would create new infrastructure. When you got rid of that deployment, you would tear down the infrastructure. But reality isn't always like that. Like with Kubernetes, often the pattern for deploying is you have a long-lived deployment that you update. And it's the same sometimes with Nomad with job specs. So that's one aspect. And the other aspect is teams often have these Kubernetes deployments and job files that they've spent a lot of time creating, and they don't want to just abandon them, but they also want to move to Waypoint and see what Waypoint can offer. So mutable deployments is a way for those teams to sort of soft land into Waypoint. You can bring your existing job files and Kubernetes YAMLs and still use some of the powerful features of Waypoint.
I think that's a really good point too, and kind of seeing with each incremental release of Waypoint, we kind of see this ability and this thoughtfulness in adding in different components to what Waypoint is, right? It's not just a CLI, but also a server. Now it also has runners and the ability to capture GitOps workflows very well. In terms of kind of like what's is there anything that you're excited about in terms of being able to stand up new Waypoint servers in a different location or anything like that? Was there anything added in 04 on that note?
Yeah, I know we added ECS deployments. So one thing we provide with the Waypoint CLI is the server install command. It's sort of like the Windows easy mode, if you will. And you can do the expert mode, you can install it yourself. We give you all of those tools, but if you just want our recommended approach, this is what the install command's for. And so one thing we added was installing on ECS, and before that we had supported Docker, Kubernetes, and Nomad. So it just added another thing into the fray for that easy mode install.
And I will say it's shockingly easy, like especially compared to other to equivalents out there. Like if you look at what it takes to stand up something like Spinnaker and the microservices that you need, like with Waypoint, like the Waypoint install command, it'll make EFS file systems for you, and it'll make the ALB for ingress. Like it really does everything.
It's really nice when you're able to capture that 80%. Like, don't get me wrong, I like being able to configure and tinker and tweak, things as needed. But it's really nice to have that. There's something really powerful about a strong opinion about how to do something, and then once you figure out, your use case might need something a little bit deeper or a little bit more thorough. Being able to adjust that is quite helpful. So thank you for adding that. That was really cool. I got to test out some ECS workloads myself, and that was pretty awesome. Cool. So my next question is, some default platforms that teams use, we talked a little bit about, were Kubernetes, Nomad, and serverless kinds of flows when it comes to deploying our applications. Do you see any other platforms that are on the rise in terms of usage, or things that people should be mindful of, or maybe even start investigating?
Yeah, I would say One thing I was thinking about, and I'm sure I know Isaac has some thoughts too, is I feel like we see a lot of ECS usage, and that's one reason why we added the install the Waypoint server. And not only can you install a server there, but you can also deploy your applications to ECS. And that's probably one platform that I think I see a decent amount of requests for, like through GitHub. Yeah.
And then for me, just keeping my eye on like the far-flung future, the things that most interest me are some of the platforms that the CDNs are building, the FAS platforms. They have like such a wide footprint. I think that enables some interesting applications. And then I think it might be a little too early to count VMs out. Like unikernels seem pretty interesting. There's some movement there. No one's really come up with a cohesive platform yet, but it could be interesting.
Yeah.
That really fascinates me as well. Just kind of like I've been hearing a lot about WASM. I've been talking to Nick Jackson a lot. So hearing those have been some fun and interesting conversations and cool use cases. But it's interesting to see kind of, Docker was such a defining moment and a defining thing. And then to see this jump onto containerization and then kind of taking a look at what is going to happen in the future is just always a good conversation, always a lot of fun. Yeah. I love it. It's super dope. If you have any other questions and you'd like to raise them in the chat, please feel free to throw those in there. And we'd love to reference those and get back to you on that front. But otherwise, I've got, obviously I've got a good backlog of questions to get through, but please let us know if you have anything that you would like to ask. Speaking of community and asking questions, what is the team's process currently for scheduling things into milestones, and how do you go about deciding, what's next to work on for the project?
It's funny you bring that up, because that's been like a recent discussion point for the team on like what is exactly our process. And I think it's important that we define it now, because we've grown, and so we have more people, and the project's getting a little more active. And so I guess one of the big things, like if you're a community member looking outside in, one of the things we want to prioritize is, bugs and different feature requests. And so anytime like a bug is raised or something's broken or doesn't work right, like those things we try to put in, next release milestones, or point releases is what we're calling them, because we want to make sure, things are working and, we don't have panics in the server or whatever. But then in terms of like the bigger future forward thinking features, maybe the next release, we have like the .o milestones. We try to put those more feature related issues into there. So if you're curious, you can go on it's all up on GitHub. You can click on the milestones link under issues and kind of see what's coming in the pipeline. But yeah.
I think Panic at the Disco is a lot more fun than Panic at the Server. Just have to say it on that front. I prefer that.
Me too. I think a lot of people would.
Awesome. Really awesome to hear too that it's keeping that focus on the community and not just developing these things just to have them, or I really like that kind of engagement and really that feeling that is difficult to do and need to really figure out what is important. I feel like that's a lot of questions that a lot of companies ask, but it's been nice to have vocal people in the community.
Yeah, and I will say we've had like a handful of community members who have been participating early in the project, like since, I don't know, was it October, November when it was released? And so, their input has been super valuable for us. Like it's like, I think one of them ended up, they found like a memory leak that we were able to fix that we wouldn't have found just because, they were using it to do real work. That's like an awesome thing about, the community. And so it's great to have them, and we love their input.
I think that's something that is a great point, is that a lot of people will use the tool in ways that you've never expected. Right. They'll find workflows and things like that. Have there been any that have been big surprises to you, or either interesting workflows that you've found, or things that you're like, I didn't know you could do that with that?
Yeah, I can tell you as an outsider, like I was expecting sort of the project to be much more, driven by insight, but it really is, there's a lot of feedback taken from the community. And I can say, like, pretty often there have been features that we've been, thinking about and planning as like a sort of far-flung future feature. But after one or two people actually hit the issue in reality, it makes us pause and say like, oh, actually, this really is something that we should address sooner. So there's a lot of impact that feedback has on the roadmap.
Definitely.
It's interesting. It's always fun to see that. There's a small anecdote that I had was using Java and one of my N-1 companies or N-N companies that I was at. There was someone who I can't remember which IDE it was. I think it was a JetBrains IDE, and they always, whenever they'd get an alert about a Java class or something like that, like this could potentially not be typed correctly, someone always found that error when they would ship it. So they took that with a lot more credence in the future. So
Nice.
maybe we'll get that with Waypoint here in the future at some point.
Yeah.
But cool. So kind of talking through Waypoint's workflows and other things on that note, are there any features that are favorites of yours that people might not know about yet until you disclose it now?
I know Izaak has some. I'll let him go.
Yep. So as someone where like nearly all the features of Waypoint are new to me, there are a few definitely that stood out as like, wow, I can't believe a project this new has thought through like these cases and has these features. And like some of the high level stuff is just like a UI that's fully functional, as our UI is. That definitely seems like I was expecting it to be a late game feature, but no, it's here and it's great. In terms of specific features, one thing that really blew my socks off was when I did a Lambda deployment and then saw that Waypoint had an exec feature. And I was like, haha, here's an edge case that I can exploit. I'm going to file my first issue. And then it worked. I execed into a Lambda function. And I was like, how on earth is this happening? What am I even exec into? What's going on? And it turned out Waypoint had spun up an ECS pod with the Docker image, the same one that was using the Lambda function. And that's what it put me into. So it's like, it's the same environment, but it's a comprehensive place where you can run things like database migrations. And I just thought that was a really clever solution. A few others are live config updates. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Brian. I think this might actually be new in .4, where
I think I think it's a recent feature. Yeah, you're right.
If you are using Waypoint for config and you push a new config variable, the Waypoint entry point binary that's responsible for spawning your process, it's watching and it'll notice that your config has changed and it will hup your process for you so that you can pull in the new config from an environment variable. So those are a few of my favorites.
Nice. I guess it's, yeah, I'm not sure what, because the question is like one that no one knows about yet.
It's like no Easter eggs, nothing like that yet.
I know, not yet. Could be.
I really do like that about the dynamic configuration as well, and kind of seeing that, that's always something that I found difficult in Kubernetes specifically is knowing whether your secrets would update the pods that you're running or the config maps. And I know there's in recent versions of Kubernetes that have come out that has gotten easier and you can make them immutable. However, being able to have that guarantee that they actually make their way into your application is difficult. And so that's one of the features I personally really, really enjoy, as well as integrating with Vault and other things on that front too. I'm biased because I work here, but very fun to see. Cool. I did see a question come in, more of a comment around production ready documentation and Waypoint. When it comes to things like that and kind of getting things documented, it's a difficult job, and being able to sum up some of these features and address the community on how they are to be used. If something isn't clear, or if people wanted to get involved with updating those docs or creating issues for that, where is the best place that they would do that? Would that be GitHub, or is there a better place to kind of get a sounding board on that?
I think the best thing to do is if you're reading something on our docs and it's confusing, or there's something missing, or whatever the case may be, like definitely feel free to open an issue. Don't feel like, if you want to fix it, that's awesome. We'd love your contribution. But if it's just something where it's like it's confusing, just open an issue and then we'll take a look and try to make it better. I'd say that's like the best process for it. Because we're we make mistakes, and so if there's something that's wrong, or I would like to fix it.
Awesome. I like that, and kind of that focus on, life is iterating on things, nothing being perfect. And I really like getting that, being able to have that level of insight. I did see a shout out from Mishra in the chat. So howdy, friend of the show, Mishra. He said hidden gems are the runners. And I definitely agree with that one too. Being able to configure how you authenticate to AWS to stand up things like Lambda functions and other things like that, different types of configuration are absolutely beneficial, as well as running your GitOps workflows and listening to when you have updates happen with your Waypoint configurations. I think that I really efficient too. I thought that I had something broken or wrong when I was working with one of the earlier builds of that. And I saw that the Docker container wasn't running. I was like, what am I doing wrong? And then push something through, saw it spin up, wake up, run the thing, and then go back to sleep. Was really cool. I thought that was awesome.
Yeah, I'll pipe in on the runners being cool too. Like one of the things that I really like about the Waypoint architecture is that like the server is really just this orchestrator, and it's runners that are responsible for doing everything. So in the standard flow between a CLI and a server, you'd expect the server to be doing the work, but what's actually happening is your local CLI is registering itself with the server as a runner, and it's doing almost all of the work with the platforms. So that leads to some big security benefits. Like one of the scariest things about installing one of these orchestrators in somewhere like AWS is you have to attach like the all IAM role to it to let it do whatever it's going to do. But your developers presumably already have the permissions that they need to get their work done. So with Waypoint, because the server is delegating those tasks back to the developer's machine to run on, it can pull from the developer's local context any AWS or other platform credentials that it needs to do the deployment.
I think that's going to unlock quite a good amount of workflows as well, with hoping Kubernetes in the future and just being able to set things in that way. I think as we have not seen the last of cool, innovative things that will come out of Waypoint and runners. I really can't wait to see what the future brings on that front. We should have a time machine.
I will say there's some fun things coming out with runners soon. It's in the works. So that's as much as I'll say.
I like it.
Yeah.
Awesome. When it comes to things that you're seeing in the Waypoint community and taking a look at your Waypoint, like after you run Waypoint init and you have that Waypoint HCL file that you start working with, have you started to see some best practices emerge within the Waypoint community and how to work with Waypoint files or different architectures based on how things are set up?
I guess I want to say one thing I'm noticing that is kind of exciting to see is there's a few community members who are giving the mutable Nomad job spec plugin a shot. And so all the different kinds of templating that they're using for using their existing job spec files is a pretty cool workflow to see. Yeah, I guess that's what I would say is an interesting best practice is adopting, those existing deployment workflows into the new Waypoint way of things.
That's something I've seen a lot of comments on are how to support the multi-environment. And this is not just Waypoint. This is a question I get a lot about Terraform too, is how do I define these different environments? And, kind of, for me, it's been an exercise in rethinking how some things are done, or, asking a lot of clarifying questions with, is this something that you have to do, or can you use progressive delivery? Can you have a canary type setup for your deployments? What is keeping you in this type of pattern? Kind of like if you start building a structure with wood, you might build it differently if you had concrete, and just kind of thinking through those types of constraints and concerns. But do you also see those questions around like environments and things of that nature?
I definitely have. I've seen lots of people interested, taking the best practices from the previous worlds and trying to apply them to Waypoint, trying to figure out like, okay, this can be maybe a reimagining of what it looks like to deploy and run software in the cloud. But what are the things that I want to bring with me from my previous experiences? And it seems like that's one that people are definitely interested in, is how do I work with multiple environments? Take it as an assumption that if multiple environments are what I want, how do you apply that to Waypoint? And I know that's something that we're thinking about actively.
Mm-hmm. It's a cool one, and I can't wait to see kind of how that develops out, and kind of what your thoughts continue to be on that front. I know that there was also a question in the chat about people being curious about work started to integrate with Terraform and how to work with that. I do know that there is that Terraform Cloud Config dynamic plugin that's available today, but was curious if you know of any other integration points with Terraform or honestly other HashiCorp tooling. Do you know of anything right now?
I definitely see a ton of potential. Like there's so much room for these things to play well, like to use, to leverage Vault for improved application secrets, leverage something like Boundary to say like Waypoint can show you your running instances, and you can use maybe Boundary to actually get in there and do something with them. And I know it's something we're definitely thinking about.
Yeah, no, we have a Vault Auth plugin, and I'm unfortunately blanking on which part of Waypoint it is, but I believe it's for like getting secrets out into your config. But yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff we can do with all of the different Hashi tools. So yeah, there's a lot of fun potential there.
I'm excited. I almost envision them as these mythical objects that if you combine them together, you can make these really cool things happen too. Like even Terraform and Terraform console sync to update security groups and firewalls, things like that. I think there's no limit to all of the amazing things that you can do. So also really, really fun conversations to have on that front. I did see another question come up, and that was, what are the best resources except the project website to get started with Waypoint? For that one, I would have to say HashiCorp or learn.hashicorp.com. I'll go ahead and grab that link and put that in the chat. But fantastic ways of kind of going through some of the different workflows that you can set up with Waypoint and really come up to speed. If you like Waypoint the hard way, maybe just try Waypoint --help. That would be one option as well.
Also, if you've finished the Learn Guide and you've looked through the project page, we also have a GitHub repo that's HashiCorp Waypoint examples, dash examples. And so the whole point behind that is sort of the like baseline, like what is it like to deploy, a Ruby app or a Java app on Kubernetes and or no matter like what have you. So maybe check that out as like a starting point too, if you're just trying to see like what does a Waypoint project look like for like a hello world.
Well, thanks for pointing us in the right direction, Brian. That was quite helpful. With learning Waypoints and kind of being in that mindset of, understanding more, wanting to help out, what are some of the most meaningful ways to contribute to Waypoint? I feel like it's a little bit more than just opening up an issue, just opening up a PR. Are there some good tips that will give you a little bit more insight as somebody who, as working on the team that works on Waypoint? Is there anything that helps you or better informs you when people raise up issues or open up PRs?
I think one thing that I'm excited to see as more people adopt it is the real world use cases of Waypoint. Like the examples repo is fine. It's good to have the hello worlds, but real applications have real concerns and considerations. And so I think one awesome thing that people could maybe contribute Waypoint to without having to, write, Go code or whatever, is to try to use Waypoint with like whatever they're currently deploying. Because I think those sort of like insights are things that we can't always see because everyone has like their own special workflow for deploying. So if you end up doing that, like maybe feel free to put it on GitHub and maybe share it on we have like a discuss forum. Like that'd be a great place to share it. We'd love to see what you tried and what didn't work. And I think that kind of contribution would be really great to see.
Yeah, I'll second that. Waypoint, I think, is a big part of its value proposition is that it's opinionated. If it was just, you could just use the direct cloud platform directly if you wanted ultimate composability and configurability. Waypoint provides an opinionated workflow, but at the same time, it's important that opinionated workflow matches with what the community wants to be doing. If we have a set of opinions that doesn't align with everyone else, it's not going to work well. So I'm really interested to see people try to use it and then see where their opinions and Waypoint's opinions mismatch and see how we can start to converge.
That's really excellent, and I think that's hopefully that helps people out there understand what is helpful. Instead of just raising your hand or kind of like being like, shoot, this doesn't work. Having a little bit more insight into why it might not work helps to solve that problem. So, and I know most people please feel free to at me literally on Twitter, anywhere that you can find me. My online presence name is OnlyDole, ONLYDOLE, and I love having conversations when things don't work. I know a lot of people don't, but I find it fun to figure out where you're stuck and can kind of find out ways to help, and then bring that feedback back to the team as well, or kind of help formulate that so it's a little bit more easier to understand for everybody. So yeah, please let us know. Awesome. My next question is, if I wanted to start making a Waypoint plugin, I've seen some for Kubernetes, I've seen some for AWS Lambda. Where would be the best place to start kind of taking a look at how to develop a plugin and some of the features I have available to me?
Yeah. So we have a how to extend Waypoint guide on our project page, and hopefully the chat will get that link. And I would say that's probably the best place to start. And so kind of going back to the docs question, how to write a plugin is often not the easiest thing to write a guide for. And so if you try it and you're like, hey, this isn't working, I'm getting these, compile errors or whatever, again, feel free to let us know. But I would say I would start there. Some other good resources I would say is if you go to the Waypoint repo and go into, on the top level, there's this thing called built-in, and you can see the plugins where we've already written. Maybe just reading through that source code after you've gone through the guide might be useful too, just to see how does the Nomad plugin work? How does Docker work? Yeah, that'd be my advice.
I think really getting a sense of how, again, kind of getting back to that architecture discussion and understanding how Waypoint connects with all, there are multiple pieces inside of it, and understanding how each of those link together, I feel like is really helpful in kind of understanding your intent when thinking about writing a plugin or what's possible with plugins. So great that there's a resource about how to actually go and extend that as well. So again, thank you for that. That's dope.
Yeah, no, that's that's another area where I think things are changing fast, especially because we, the core team, have been the one to have written most of the plugins, and we have a really tight understanding of the whole architecture. So I know one thing we're thinking about is how to make those plugin interfaces a little bit friendlier and a little bit more abstract, maybe. So having more feedback from people actually writing plugins, maybe without the universe brain context on Waypoint, would be really valuable.
Absolutely. And I know, talking with you a little bit, Izaak, and the rest of the team, kind of thinking through. So right now we have that support for Lambda, and then kind of, what if we wanted to have a cron trigger on that versus this, and all of these different facets of how you can use that one thing, or, even with Kubernetes, using an apply versus maybe supporting a manifest right out of the gate, kind of starting to understand that even though it's one platform, you can kind of approach it in a different way, I think is also just an interesting, even if it's just a thought experiment, a really interesting thing to think through and kind of talk on and think about.
Yeah, definitely. I can imagine if just because you see there's an AWS Lambda plugin, that doesn't mean that has to be the only AWS Lambda plugin. I think that we're open to the idea of a different take on how to use existing resources.
Cool. Awesome. My next question is a little bit of a different one, but kind of wanted to pose this to you. So if you had a time machine, we've already talked about this earlier in the stream, it's getting closer every day. If you had Waypoint 10 years ago, what do you think that you would have used it for? How would it have helped you in your career?
It's an interesting question.
You can assume that Kubernetes, Nomad, all of these things exist too, because that would be really painful, right?
That's what I was wondering. I was like, is Kubernetes 10 years old?
Well, I don't think I can go back 10 years, unfortunately, but I can give examples of how I used it before. So one of the most vivid examples that I have is on the presidential campaign, ramping up the team with 3 months before the general election, quadrupling the size of the team and saying all right, here we go. We're all going to need to be productive, and for you to do that, you're going to have to be you're going to have to like deploy your things to EC2. So here you go. You're going to have to use Spinnaker for this, and the AWS tools for this, and your logs are over here, and in this Elasticsearch cluster. But oh yeah, also cron jobs, like those are going to be over here in Kubernetes, and you're going to have to learn kubectl, learn how to write a manifest, and learn how to do kubectl logs. Oh, and by the way, you're also on call for these Lambda functions. And so here's how you deploy to a Lambda. You have to make a zip file and upload it this way, and God help you getting anything useful out of CloudWatch sometimes. So that's the that workflow. Like if I could have brought Waypoint on top of all of that and said like, all right, just Waypoint whatever, instead of learning all these platform specific details, like that would have been a massive time saver and efficiency boon.
Yeah, I guess like regardless of like what tools you might have used 10 years ago, theoretically, I think just the idea of like develop your like team onboarding for like whatever deployment process you have, I think is powerful, because like this deployment problem is something I feel like I've been trying to solve for a while. And I feel like every time I think about it, it's, no matter like what team or company you go to, everyone has their special, like chewing gum and wire solution for deploying. It's, scattered over here, a little bit over there, just like what Izaak was saying. And I think maybe one of the more powerful things Waypoint is trying to do is to try to make that process better and hopefully more repeatable. And and if you can get people onboarded faster by just saying learn this one tool instead of, I don't know how many you listed off, 5 or 6, then that seems like a great win for the team.
I completely agree with that. I also feel like all of those special tools have special names too, like shoehorn or bubblegum or duct tape.
Yeah.
But I can't tell you how many teams I've worked in. I'm sure that's a lot of your experiences out there watching too, is, working with teams and having like, all right, there's 15 different ways that we deploy this app. Some use Jenkins, some use GitHub Actions, and just having this proliferation of things that you use just to accomplish, like, I just want to deploy an application at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It's so painful. It doesn't have to be. So thank goodness for Waypoint on that front.
Yeah. I love that Waypoint doesn't try to replace all those things. Like it's not hostile to them. You can still have those workflows that, use the best of all of the various platforms, and Waypoint is just the consistency there on top.
I do like that too, and how you can kind of stub out that deployment process too. And you don't have to, you can kind of iterate and pull it in and start to use it with those, whether it be a newer application or one that you're just trying to get off of another platform to use. So I do like that. And yeah, I couldn't imagine trying to solve all of those problems on top of being the tool that it is today. I'm glad that it didn't go that direction.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I have one more question, but I'm sure it'll be a little bit more involved, kind of about the future of Waypoint and 0.5. But would like to remind you that those of you watching, if you do have any questions, please feel free to throw those in the chat, and then we will get to those. Otherwise, we can kind of close up with this question. So feel free to pop those questions in. And with that, what is the team focusing on with Waypoint 0.5? What's next?
You want to go, Izaak, first?
Sure.
So, yeah.
Yep. So I think the major focus of 0.5 is around how to make Waypoint more useful to a platform builder in like a big enterprise. I know Waypoint has this like really magical flow for a small team where you can have you can start with your source code and do Waypoint up, and all of a sudden, bam, your application is on the internet. And that's really amazing. But often that's not exactly what a big enterprise wants. Like they'll have, or they'll have additional requirements about like Waypoint being configured in certain ways and having certain visibility. So that the major focus of 0.5 is visibility, flexibility, and consistency geared toward enterprise platform builders.
Nice. Yeah, I guess I'm thinking about a couple of things. One thing I'm excited about, I know, is the team is working on adding more input variables and like enabling that feature into Waypoint, which I think is pretty exciting. We're able to give all these variables like different scopes. And so, like I'm thinking about like Packer or Terraform, for example, they have like a similar feature. And so we're kind of like bringing Waypoint back into that. By enabling people to do these different input variable workflows. So I think that's exciting. And the other thing that's kind of related to that is we're getting a lot more UI improvements, in the next few releases. Our team is a lot bigger now than it was the first beginning of the year. And so we're starting to see some like really nice updates, especially just in terms of like readability and being able to figure out, what's going on when you open the UI and making sure the information that's presented is relevant. And so I think that's a pretty exciting thing. Yeah.
One of the things that I'm excited about coming in 0.5 is that increased visibility into like what the platforms are, like what's actually happening in the platforms. Like Waypoint now shows you the high level Waypoint constructs. It'll show you we made a deployment, we made a release. And with the last release, we've just sort of started to tie it back more into the platform. Like we've made this release and we checked with the platform. Here's what the status of the release is. Yeah. And there's more work coming on that front, potentially showing the resources that the platform creates and letting platform operators look and see, all right, here's what Waypoint is actually doing behind the curtains.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited for that because I think having Waypoint demystify like what is actually involved when you deploy something to some of these more complex platforms, I think is just like a really strong feature that I think people will resonate with, just making it clear like what's actually going on and like what was actually required just seems like a nice feature to have, especially if things are down, if things are red and you're just like, I just need to fix this and like I don't know where to start, hopefully some of these project views can say like, oh well, the load balancer is red, so that's why it's down, or the sort of scenarios.
It's a fun like lenticular design challenge too. Like you want to have some people. Well, yeah. So lenticular, those little puzzles where like you look at them from one angle and it shows one thing. You look at it from another angle and it shows the other thing. Like that's sort of what I'd like it to be at the end. Like if you're looking at it from the angle of I'm a developer and I really just want the thing to work, you can just click a button and you just see the deployment there, and you don't have to see all of the detail. But if you look at it from the perspective of a platform engineer, or maybe a developer who's now a little bit harried and debugging because it's not working, like all of a sudden now you can see, oh, well, here we go. Here's the huge massive resources. And we've helpfully highlighted the bit where you probably care about looking.
Yeah. It's a good vocab word.
I love that, and I love that now I can define that as whether it was a Pokemon card or something else that I was from my childhood, being able to be like that's what that effect was. Yeah, I really like that analogy too. There's so many working as an application developer or an SRE, having the ability to focus on what's important to you and get that data quickly is an art, and something that's so difficult to do. And so it's really like that analogy in terms of kind of focusing on the right things and just, like, oh, just hold it this way. Oh, there it is. There's the red status.
I think that's actually, that analogy comes from the head designer of Magic the Gathering cards.
Oh, really?
Perfect.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Not talking about actual, lenticular cards, but his design of like, we want expert players to see this and new players to see this.
It's so cool. That's awesome. I did see one question come in. Any thoughts on adding the capability to extend Waypoint by pushing the interface to something like HTTP endpoints as opposed to a binary?
Pushing. Guess I'm not sure what that means.
Does this mean like instead of a job coming back to like the Waypoint runner binary, the job goes to some like arbitrary executor that you'd implement? I'm just guessing.
I think, yeah, and that question comes from Shane. If you do have a little bit more information on that, feel free to throw that in chat and kind of guide us in the right direction. I think what I'm interpreting that is, and correct me if I'm wrong, is kind of are there the abilities to using REST or gRPC interact with Waypoint in different ways?
Oh, I see. Like instead of using the CLI binary, use the API directly. Is that okay? That makes sense. I think that's something I know Izaak was thinking about, but it's probably not currently supported just based on a few bugs that we found. But I think, if that's something that you're thinking about, like that's probably another good example of like opening a feature request and having like your thoughts on how you wanted to use the endpoints. Yeah.
Yeah, I can totally imagine it being an important part of the Waypoint portfolio in the future too. And we're definitely on the way there. Like there's the gRPC API right now is, it's exposed. You can look at it. And having an ecosystem that plugs into there would be very interesting.
Cool. Yeah, definitely check it out. Proto buff your knowledge, and you should be good to go.
I feel like you had that one saved in your back pocket.
I was just waiting. Waiting.
Yep. That is one interesting thing about Waypoint. When I was trying to understand the API, the very first thing that I did was like pull up the UI and then the network inspector and see like, all right, what is it doing? And I was like, oh, what the heck is this? What is the UI doing? And it was making gRPC RPC calls, which I think is really interesting. I don't know of another project in this, in this class that's doing that. It might not be doing it forever, but it's if you want to play with that fun little wrinkle of Waypoint, by all means.
It's so interesting to see like all of the different types of thoughts that went into crafting out those interfaces, and whether it be something that's a little bit more event focused, like with the runner and things like that, versus just calls to Waypoint server and how those are set up too. But yeah, it's just kind of fascinating. I know some people like reading books before bed. Usually, going through RFCs and taking a look at source code is something that's should put me to sleep a little bit more quickly, but it doesn't. I find that kind of fun to read. Yeah. But awesome. Well, I don't see any more questions in the chat. If anyone has any final questions to ask the group before we depart today, please feel free to throw those in, and we can get to those as we close things out. But with that, I'd like to ask you first, Brian. Are there any, as we part today, are there any words of wisdom that you have, any mantras, any insights, anything like that you have for us? Doesn't have to be related to Waypoint. Could be anything, just top of mind, new hobby, anything like that.
Oh man, put me on the spot. Let's see. Words of wisdom. I mean, it's summertime. Make sure you're relaxing. That's probably my words of wisdom. Enjoy the good weather. See your family. Take breaks. Yeah, that's my words of wisdom.
What about yourself, Izaak? Do you have any words of wisdom for us?
One of my favorites, apart from lenticular design, is strong opinions loosely held, which I think is something that Waypoint definitely, is going down right now. Like Waypoint tries to have opinions about how it should work, how you could be doing deployments, but they're not. It doesn't clutch to them. If it tries to expose configurability for you to be able to make it work for you. So as you look at Waypoint, don't think any of the opinions in there are strongly held, and also in your own lives. It's good to have an opinion and not be stuck in indecision, but also don't be afraid to part with it if a better opinion comes along.
I really like that. Just make sure to ask those questions and truly understand what it is that you're working with. I think that's a question that I had a mentor at Disney Studios, and his name is Joe Michael. So shout out to you, Joe Michael, if you ever watch this. I'd love, he'd go into an incident or anything like that, and he'd be like, "What's the problem you're trying to solve?" Absolutely was really, it made people stop and think about, good question. I don't know. Let's ask a couple other questions. But really agree with that. I think that the only piece of wisdom I have for y'all is it definitely is summer. And so if you kind of thinking about sleeping and getting rest, if you do call sleep in any of your programs, if you have to do that, make sure that make sure that whether it's seconds or milliseconds, because that makes a huge difference. Awesome.
And put it in the config parameters too. Because if it's just sleep time, you never know. You never know what it is.
Please specify your units. We did have a shout out from a friend of the show, Evan Phoenix. He said, wear sunscreen. So 100%.
A good call.
100% agree. Awesome. Well, I guess with that, parting is such sweet sorrow. Sorry to leave you all here, but thank you for joining us today. It was an absolute pleasure, and we'll catch you next time.